All right, Discovery 2, how do we refill and bleed the cooling system? I've done all my work. I've replaced all my hoses, water pump, radiator, everything I was working on. So next step is going to be to remove the radiator cap. I guess that would be the coolant tank cap. Expansion tank, there we go. And we're going to pull it out of its place carefully. See, it has this little notch right here. That goes into that opening right there. But you're going to need to, from the top, you're going to tuck in the hose first, angle it down and back in when you're replacing it. So it's just the opposite for when you get it out. So angle it up, twist, wiggle, get it out. So now we're going to either need somebody to hold it or find some way to secure it up higher. The whole point of it, the quick release, is so you can get up higher. This cap needs to be the highest point of the cooling system. So I'll do that in a moment here. Next other thing we're going to do is remove your bleed screw, which you can see I already did. It's fully out. It's just sitting out to the side. And then I'm going to go ahead and put in my 50-50 coolant mixture. One more quick note. Do be careful of all of these black plastic hoses that come off of here. They're very brittle and they like to break. Worst case, you can always replace them with some flexible stuff, but let's just keep it original if we can. And yes, this is normal. This should just be, that's the overflow hose. You see I've secured it up. In this case, all I did was just kind of cram a blanket carefully under it so it could stay up. So it's pretty secure. So now I'm going to start filling it up. So now we're topping up the coolant. The whole idea of this is that this is now the highest point of the cooling system. So the idea is we want to push out all the air. As I pour it into here, it's going to push the air out of the bleed screw hole. While we're talking about the cooling system, you'll note I'm pouring in green coolant. That's what everybody's going to recommend in these. Old school conventional green coolant. It doesn't last as long. Ideally you want to flush it and fill it every couple of years. But it's the least destructive and the most protective for the engine. Decks cool, and a lot of extended life antifreezes will eat through all the seals. Like there's class actions against GM for their decks cool. So I would not personally put any orange coolant in any of my Rovers. And again, this is, I buy full strength and I dilute it. And when you dilute full strength conventional coolant, you're going to want to use distilled water, which you can get for about $1 a gallon at Walmart or a grocery store. So we give this a minute, it's starting to trickle down into the system. You'll see I'll get little bubbles that are going to come up in here as it works its way in as well. And how do we know when we've had enough? Is it's going to come out of the bleed screw. So until it's coming out this hole here, we haven't done enough and we're going to keep going. Now since we know coolant's going to come out of here, I like to put a little something underneath to at least direct the coolant in one direction. So we know it's going to leak out, that way I can get it on one thing instead of everything. So it's got one whole gallon of 50-50 in there, so I'm going to go ahead and put in another one. Stop there for a little bit, let it bubble down for a minute or two. I'll come back once we start coming out of the bleed screw. I put some more in and I can see it has just started trickling out of this hole. So at this point, there's still some air in the system, This is a good initial bleed. So I'm putting the cap back in. I like to feel the pipes. I feel there's definitely some fluid in these now. And I left this just a little bit off so air can still come out of it. See, when I squeeze the pipes, you can still get some bubbles. But it is still actively draining from up here into that because it's still higher up. At this point, you actually see they just evened out. So I'm going to go ahead and put in just a tiny bit more. And again, we're waiting for the same thing, fluid and bubbles to come out of the bleeder port. As you can see right here, there's a few bubbles coming out. Maybe. Come on, phone. Well, there were some bubbles coming out. We'll pour some more. Keep an eye on it. See, make sure you have a steady flow of coolant coming out of it right now. See if I unscrew it a bit, it just keeps on flowing out. I'm gonna go ahead and screw it back down. Squeeze the pipes a little bit more. That tends to move some of the air around. That's how you get your basic fill. Next steps, I'm going to put this expansion tank back down. You'll have some different opinions, but I'm going to run it for like 30 seconds just to pump fluids through, since now I know it's at least full. See if I can get any of the air that is left to get stuck up here, up top. So not enough to get it hot at all, just to move some coolant around. We'll see if we get a little bit more. And then the idea is going to be that you're going to drive it, warm it up for a bit, and then you'll come park it, and then you'll wait at least a couple hours, if not even overnight. And then you'll once again just open up this bleed port, and you'll get a little bit more air out of it each time. And the same thing, you'll lift this up again. Lift up, remove, and you get the last little bit of air out of that port. And there's some discussion about when needing to get the heater core. These are the heater hoses, send and receive. Sometimes people aren't getting a good bleed through the heater core. Some will say that when you do that parking, to let it cool down, park it on an uphill slope as steep as you can get, and then let it cool down again, and then do the bleed. And hopefully that'll start getting some of the air from this side moving up this way.